What is going on, Colts Nation, and welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back with another one, guys. Well, the preseason is officially done, everybody. That's right. We are less than 2 weeks from the start of the regular season, Colts versus Dolphins, week 1. But before we do that, Derek, we got to talk about some roster cuts here. So the Colts' final 53-man roster is going to be cut down on Tuesday. So we have, and the Colts obviously have, a lot of work to do here when it comes to some players they're going to have to let go or potentially bring back on the practice squad. But they got to trim it down to 53, so here we are. All right, well, before we do that, just really quick, we want to shout out FanDuel once again for sponsoring this video. Go check out FanDuel, guys. As we approach the start of the regular season, be sure to go check out FanDuel, all they have over there for the Indianapolis Colts and so many other teams. But let's jump into this, Derek. Let's kind of start here because I just have to say right off the bat, man, this was really difficult. This was really difficult to come up with some roster cuts, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You know, when we were kind of looking at it, we're like, oh man, how are you going to figure this out? We had to do a little bit of number crunching and we had to make a few switches and then be like, no, actually, let's go back to that. So I think we landed on a spot that we're both pretty content with. So let's jump right into this, man, with the quarterbacks. So we got 3 quarterbacks here. Who are they?
Obviously Daniel Jones is going to be your starter week 1, so that's obvious. Anthony Richardson at QB2 as well. And then I think most people, after what we saw this last weekend against the Cincinnati Bengals, while both Riley Leonard and Jason Bean both had phenomenal performances against the Bengals, Jason Bean's shoulder injury does also kind of put you into an effect there. But Riley Leonard has, been running with the threes all camp and has had some good success. So I think it's obvious Riley Leonard will likely be QB3 rounding out the group.
Yeah, Riley Leonard looked really, really good again against backups, but still, I think you feel comfortable with him as that QB3 right there. Yep. I think we can probably pretty safely say that Riley Leonard is QB3 right now. So I think those were the 3 for the Indianapolis Colts. And then when moving on to running back, we actually listed 4 running backs here. Who are those 4, Derek?
Obviously, Jonathan Taylor. Haven't seen much of him recently, but that is fine. DJ Giddens likely gets put at RB2 going into this season just due to the numerous amounts of injuries that the Colts have had at the position. I think that Tyler Goodson is going to round out the group at 3 there, depending on the injury. I don't know how bad it is. He could potentially start the year on IR. We haven't really heard anything about the severity of the injury. We know he's injured, but we don't really know anything of the number yet. And then running back 4 is where it gets interesting. Because, again, Khalil Herbert has been hurt for the last couple weeks. We haven't heard anything about it. And Ulysses Bentley IV has been taking the majority of those snaps with the 3rd and 4th stringers right now. And so I think just by process of elimination, unless there's somebody else when they get cut and the Colts want to take another chance on another guy, I think Ulysses Bentley IV is going to take this final spot at running back 4 and cut Khalil Herbert out of the rotation, if you agree with that, Cody.
I don't know if I do. I mean, I understand. Maybe it's something where they put, one of those players, Goodson and or Herbert on PUP or whatever, short-term IR or something like that, where they're not technically counting for the roster, but you keep Ulysses Bentley. But I agree with you. I think he could very well find himself on the final 53-man roster pretty easily, just due, like you said, to the process of some of the injuries that have happened and kind of forced your hand in a way there. So, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Ulysses Bentley is that RB4 to start the season. And we'll just have to see on the severity on both those injuries. But Will be fascinating to see that. So those are the 4 there for the running back position. And so right now, obviously, we're at 7, so we'll keep along here. Looking at the wide receivers. And, Derek, I think this is pretty cut and dry. Again, I feel like this has been cut and dry it was basically cut and dry the same as last year in a lot of ways. We're keeping 6 wide receivers. Who are those?
It's funny, Cody, because, again, if you ask most of Colts Nation what they feel about this, the back 2 Some people might actually disagree with us in a lot of different ways, but I think we both know where the Colts will likely go with this. Pittman, Pierce, Downs, and Adonai Mitchell will obviously be the first four. Now, when it comes to 5 and 6, Ashton Doolin and Anthony Gould most likely will end up rounding out the back end of the group. Again, Gould, a guy that can provide some snaps on the offense, also a key returner for the Indianapolis Colts, so that's important. And Ashton Doolin, who can do the same, but also is a special teams ace in our punt and return coverage. So you need a guy like that. Now, some people say, why not keep 7 wide receivers? It's very rare that you do that because very rarely does wide receiver 5 and 6 even get on the field anyway in the offense. So why would you keep a 7th guy to do that when there are other positions of need that need 5 to 6 guys on it as well? So Colts fans, I know how much we love Laquan Treadwell. I know how much we like Coleman Owen. I know that what we saw against Cincinnati, Treadwell, Owen, practically everyone on the roster, Cody, that we had was getting involved offensively against the Cincinnati Bengals. So obviously, a lot of people were gravitating to those names. But I don't think that Owen and Treadwell make enough for the Indianapolis Colts to be able to do that. Maybe they find other opportunities somewhere else. If they stay on our practice squad, if we have an injury that pops up, those guys likely will find their way on. But yeah, that's probably going to be the final 6 for this group.
Yeah, I guess one thing to monitor is Ashton Doolin's injury because he did get injured on Tuesday's practice. So kind of determining what that will look like. Maybe you do keep a guy like Laquan Treadwell, on your roster to start. I could see that being the case. But I think you're right, especially at wide receiver 5 and 6. You need guys that are going to do stuff that aren't on offense, right? You need guys that are going to do stuff on special teams, whether it's in the return game, whether it's at a gunner. I mean, that's pretty much every part of the roster. You need guys that are going to be able to play special teams. If you're talking about running backs, if you're talking about receivers, if you're talking about defensive backs, even linebackers, like you need those guys to be able to do that, right? So I think that's why you would go with guys like Ashton Doolin. I mean, Ashton Doolin also, I thought, showed out in the preseason, but Anthony Gould, even, from the return standpoint, he is your top return guy. Like, you have to keep him, right? So that makes some sense there. So I think wide receiver 6 guys there makes a lot of sense for the Colts there. And I mean, I really think, Derek, you can keep both those players on your practice squad. I mean, you carried Laquan Treadwell last year on your practice squad pretty much the whole year, if I'm not mistaken. And then I think the same with Owen as well. You can keep him. So I feel pretty confident in that. I think it's pretty cut and dry. When these guys are healthy, I think your 6 are pretty obvious.
Yeah.
All right. Tight end wise, this is where things also get a little bit interesting here, Derek, because I definitely have seen some people push for 5 tight ends, but I think just for the sake of number crunching, we're going to go with 4 guys. Who are those 4?
Yeah, I was definitely one of those guys that was giving the option of potentially keeping 5 tight ends. Again, you have just so many guys with so many different skill sets, but doubt that it happens. Like you said, it probably will end up being only 4. Tyler Warren, who obviously you drafted this year to be your next great tight end, he's going to be tight end 1. Molly Cox is going to stay there at tight end 2. Drew Ogletree is likely going to stay there at tight end 3. And then Will Mallory will most likely round out the group at tight end 4. We have seen Will Mallory get some time with the 2s and the 1s. Jelani Woods hasn't really had as many of opportunities as those in camp and in the preseason games as well. We have seen Jelani Woods do some good things in the preseason games, but it doesn't change the fact he has been behind Will Mallory in the depth chart for the majority of this offseason, and he could very well be the odd man out if the Indianapolis Colts either don't put him at tight end 4 or don't bring in 5 tight ends. So keep an eye out for Jelani Woods and how that works out for him, because if he gets cut, that could be a very hot name that a lot of teams are going to be looking for when cuts happen.
And I just think from a Colts roster construction standpoint, with all the injuries we talked about, practically it doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind to keep 5 tight ends, because what's he going to do? I would rather, allocate those numbers towards other positions that might be hurting a little bit from a depth standpoint. So that's kind of why we keep 4. We've been Jelani Woods guys, so it definitely hurts to cut the kid, because I do think he does, like you said, he has a lot of talent, and it's good to see him healthy. And hope maybe they can keep him around. I don't know. He's far too talented, I think, to be kept around, but we'll have to see on that. But yeah, we're keeping 4 tight ends, and it hurts to keep 4, but I think that's kind of where we're going to go. And that's kind of how we've seen it through camp in the preseason, like you said. So that makes a lot of sense there. So, okay, let's continue on with the final position on the offense. That's that offensive line, Derek. And definitely one that's had a little bit of injuries as well, although nothing too crazy in regards to, any starters, knock on wood, obviously, for that. But yeah, when you're looking at this offensive line, we're keeping 9. I think that's pretty much what they've kept the last couple of years. But why are we going 9 here, Derek?
Yeah, typically you don't. Most teams don't keep 10 when it comes to this. You're normally keeping somewhere between 8 and 9 guys. Just depends on how your depth is. Most of the time it's 9. So obviously you're starting 5 with Bernard Ryman, Quentin Nelson, Tanner Bortolini, Matt Gonsalves, and Braden Smith. Those will be your starters. And then for your backups, Cody, you can definitely switch me up here a little bit if you feel differently about it. Because like you said, this is where it gets a little difficult, because you have to wonder who gets those spots. Jalen Travis definitely will get it, because he's your swing tackle. And especially with the injury to Blake Freeland, you need a swing tackle more than ever now. And then I think that Dalton Tucker will likely get an option, because we saw not only has he been getting reps at guard, he actually got reps at center in the final preseason game against the Bengals. So the Colts using his position versatility on the inside as well. I do believe that Luke Tenuta will definitely get in there. Again, you don't really have a lot of tackle depth right now. The Colts may look for that when roster cuts happen, but as it currently stands, I think he will probably be in that 53 rotation. Now, ultimately, Cody, I'm going to come to you with this, because we got 8 as we stand currently. What's the one other guy in the interior between Pinter, French, and Sills that you think makes it onto this final 53 man?
To me, it's not a contest. It's Danny Pinter. I mean, he's been so good for you. He started games for you. I know he's had some injuries, definitely this preseason in this camp, which is unfortunate. But if he's healthy, I'm taking Danny Pinter every time, to be honest with you, just because he's shown that when he steps in a pinch, say something happens with Tanner Bortolini, Danny Pinter gives you a lot of confidence that you're not going to miss much of a beat there. And that's huge. Those guys are hard to find, right? To find those guys that can step in a pinch, like we saw last year when Ryan Kelly went down and Bortolini was a little bit banged up. All of a sudden, Danny Pinter is that third center, stepped in and I thought performed very well. So whenever you need him to as a spot starter, I think he's one of the better spot starters at center that you can find. So for me, I'm keeping Danny Pinter every time. And it's unfortunate because I like Wesley French.
Yes.
I do. And maybe, Derek, we see a situation where maybe they're like, hey, Wesley French, go play guard maybe. And then they take him over Dalton Tucker. I don't know. I think they'll go ultimately at the end of the day with Dalton Tucker, because he started games last year too. And like you said, he also is getting some look at center. So that doesn't necessarily bode well for a guy like Wesley French.
I will say this. I didn't like Dalton Tucker as much with the starters last year. I didn't think he did as good. Obviously, we know he dominates the interior against backups.
Yes.
But we saw when he had to go up against the ones, it was bad news. And,
yes,
we had to move some pieces around because of that. And that leads me to another thing, that Wesley French also was moved around in that Bengals game. He actually got reps at left guard. So Dalton Tucker, who is currently listed as the backup behind Quentin Nelson at left guard, was getting reps against Cincinnati in that center. And then Wesley French, who is normally the backup center, one of the backup centers, was getting reps at guard. So obviously the Colts were trying to, move some pieces around, kind of see how they liked it. So it's going to be interesting to see who's the odd man out here. Because like you said, I mean, there's an argument to be made for French, Pinter, and Tucker when it comes to that final spot. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how that goes. We'll keep an eye out on that going forward.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. So that's the offense, guys. So we got some work to do here on the defensive side of things. So let's start on that defensive line, Derek. And this was something that we debated back and forth. Do the Colts keep 10? Do they keep 9? And I think we ultimately settled on 9 here that the Colts are going to keep. So who are those guys and why?
Yep, I'm definitely going to need to come back to you on this because this will be interesting.
This is tough, man.
Your starting 4, I think, is fairly obvious. You're going to have Kwity Paye, you're going to have Grover Stewart, you're going to have DeForest Buckner, you're going to have Laiatu Latu. So that's your 4. Yep. We know Samson Ebukam is going to get his because he is the veteran in the group, and he is probably your most productive outside guy in recent memory. So you're going to keep Samson. As far as defensive ends go, if we're keeping 4 defensive ends, I think that you'll see JT Tuimuluau also get in there. Now, for the interior of the defensive line, I think that Neville Gallimore and Adetomiwa Adebawari get in. I like Adetomiwa because he is a special teamer too. We have seen his role very efficiently in that. Now, ultimately, Cody, from this point, so we have 8 as we currently sit. So my mind goes between 2 guys. Well, 3 guys if you want to be in particular. There's Tyquan Lewis still. There is Tim Smith and Eric Johnson II. So are you keeping 5 defensive ends and only keeping 4 interior? Or are you keeping 4 defensive ends and 5 interior? Which one are you going with?
Yeah, man. I would say if I'm choosing them, probably Tyquan Lewis, right? Because he has been healthy. I mean, when he's been healthy, I think he's been fairly productive. And again, it's a new defensive system, so I am curious kind of how he's utilized. But I mean, Derek, we've seen him be a guy that can play some inside, some outside, a little bit of everywhere. So I just like Tyquan Lewis as kind of a guy that, like we talked about with Danny Pinter, he's never going to start necessarily, but when you need him to play, he's going to play and be fairly productive with it. So
it's
hard for me to move on from a guy like Tyquan, just because Tyquan, I think he's very talented, and I think he's just, always kind of been a role guy, but he's filled his role really well. And, with Tim Smith, I think there's a better opportunity to get him on practice squad. I really do. Although, it is hard because you're like, man, I would like to keep him just because of the run stopping ability. So do they go elect for him? I know we like Adetomiwa, but is it more of a numbers game where they want to go more big in the interior as opposed to him, So I don't know. I'm kind of torn between that, but I think if you're making me choose between those 3, I'm probably sticking with Tyquan.
Yeah, that will be very interesting. We'll see how, again, and we're going to, with this defensive scheme the way it is, with a new defensive coordinator, how he sees things, how he likes things, that is ultimately going to come down to it is who does.
I feel like the Bengals had some big boys on that defensive line. That's why I'm kind of electing to do that because, I mean, we saw them have all those different big defensive linemen in there. So that makes me think that they're going to do that a little bit more here under Lou Anarumo. They're going to have a few more big because I feel like the Colts have been known for being undersized at times with their defensive linemen. So like bringing in Tim Smith as well, I think that might be the move. I might take him over Adetomiwa, to be honest with you. If you keep 9, now if you keep 10, then obviously you keep Adetomiwa as well. But I mean, Tim Smith he's such a big, he's never going to be crazy on the stat sheet like Grover. But, if you have another guy that can be at least competent in the run game, that's an upgrade from what you had a year ago, right? Yeah. So that's the ultimate debate is like, would you rather keep, more of a run stopping guy that more, or a guy that you maybe feel like has some more upside position flexibility and all that kind of stuff. So It really comes down to preference there, I think. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And like I said, this is so hard because I could see them going multiple routes here and I would be okay with it, to be honest with you, because I get it. I would understand why.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, cool. So we're going to keep 9 there. Those are the 9. So we'll kind of see, guys, what you think on that. I'm curious to read the comments and see what you guys think. But anyway, we're keeping on here with the linebackers. Derek, this is one I kind of debated too. Do you keep 4? Do you keep 5? Just because we know they've talked about, how they're going to have less linebackers on the field, more defensive backs are going to play a lot more nickel and dime. Like they're going to do a lot of that stuff. So it's like, oh man, do you just say, hey, we're keeping 4 linebackers and we're rolling with it? I'm also curious on that Jalen Carlisle's injury, what happens there. But I think for the sake of that, we decided ultimately to keep 5 linebackers here. Who are those 5?
Well, obviously your starters going to be Carlisle and Franklin as it currently stands. Joe Bashi, who obviously came from Cincinnati this last year with Lou Anarumo on this defense. I definitely think he's got a spot locked up. Segun Alubi, I think definitely will make this roster. He has continuously made this roster over the last several years. He's just a very serviceable player in both special teams and when you ask him to take some snaps on the defense. Ultimately, if you do go 5, who is that odd man out? As you said before, is it going to be Cameron McGrone or is it going to be Austin Ajak? Now, I will say this. I think Ajak has stood out to me, Cody, more than Cameron McGrone. I think Cameron McGrone has had a couple of missed tackles, big missed tackles over the last few weeks that have that are definitely going to get noticed. And I think Ajak has made some bigger plays that the coaches are definitely going to notice. So if you ask me, I think Ajak is going to be the surprise final round out on the linebacker group over McGrone. Even though McGrone was favored over him going into camp, I think Ajak gets the 5th.
Okay. That's Derek's bold prediction here on the linebackers.
If that's my bold
keep an eye out for that
there
name.
You go.
Yeah, Austin Ajak. All right, love it. All right, let's continue on. Now we are going to go to the DBs. So looking at the DBs here, we had 10 positions to fill, and we're going to fill them, Derek, with 6 corners and 4 safeties. So let's start with the corners. Who we got here for our 6? And who are those players for you, Derek, that you think the Colts keep?
Obviously, Charvarius Ward. You're obviously keeping Kenny Moore. And, of course, Xavier Howard, who in his first week with Indianapolis was getting reps with the ones. Now, obviously, that had to do with the fact that, the cornerback depth was very stretched this week. In other news, too, Cody, I know I didn't really get a chance to talk with you much about it this week, but Juju Brents and Jalen Jones both back to practice this week. Not Jalen Jones, not all the way back yet, but was doing individual stuff. And Juju Brent's obviously playing Saturday. That's a huge thing because that lets you know as long as there's no setbacks, then Juju and Jalen most likely are going to be able to be on this depth chart once the season starts, which is a huge step for you.
Yeah.
So, Xavier Howard, that's your 3rd. Jalen Jones, Juju Brents, definitely going to be your 4 and 5. And then I believe that the 6th one will be Samuel Womack. Now, obviously, there is a lot of guys that have really stepped up this offseason. We saw Chris Lamons, what he did against the Packers. He was all over the field. Alex Johnson, the undrafted guy in 24, and Jonathan Edwards, who was a undrafted guy in this year. I mean, both guys that have done some great things. I just don't know if Edwards and Johnson have done quite enough to eclipse the resume of Samuel Womack, given the fact that Womack also, played in defense for the Colts last year and was a starter for quite a few games. So I feel like that will definitely help him. So I definitely think the Colts will keep Johnson and Edwards on the practice squad if they can. So that's my 6 for the corners.
All right. Can I make kind of a crazy prediction maybe?
Yeah, go right ahead. I love
I don't know how you're going to feel about it. I'm going to actually take Chris Lamons over Samuel Womack. And let me tell you why.
Okay.
Special teams matter.
Okay.
Chris Lamons plays special teams. Also, Chris Lamons plays nickel. You don't have a backup nickel right now.
Very true.
You might need that. That's why I'm like, gosh, you can't keep 7 corners. Like, I want to keep 7
I
corners.
want to
but I don't
keep
think you
7.
can. Yeah, like it's a hard numbers game, but it might come down to that, honestly. Like, and I think honestly, Derek, the fact that Brents and Jones returned makes me feel a little bit more confident in that decision because they're likely going to be available for week 1, and you're not going to have to rely on maybe a Samuel Womack as much. And so that is kind of why I decided to make that decision there. Now, I wish for some reason, I wish like you could put Samuel Womack at safety and you'd feel a little bit better there, but you just can't do that. So that's just the hard part
Just
about
move
these numbers
Womack
games.
to safety and cut Rodney Thomas out.
Right. Like,
Everyone in Colts
that,
Nation would be okay with that.
Right. But like, obviously he hasn't played any, so he can't really do that. So, but yeah, I mean, that is kind of my thought there is like, the more I think about it, like we said, Lamons played pretty well. He also plays, like we said, special teams, which is a big deal. I mean, it is. So that and the fact that he plays backup nickel, I don't know how much Womack got action there, but that just makes me think that could be a possibility, Derek.
Yeah, it very well could. I mean, I don't think that's insanely crazy. You're right, because obviously you don't really have a backup nickel. So, yeah,
and I like Womack a lot. You know how much I like Sam Womack. It's unfortunate. Like your corner room with the signing of Xavier Howard, it just makes it hard for a guy like Samuel Womack.
It's very difficult because, again, when you talk about the design of the defense with Lou Anarumo, you got to worry about that when can you have too many outside corners? I mean, that's definitely going to be a concern, and you got to wonder, you're right, does Chris Lamons, how much of an impact does that nickel corner position matter for Lou Anarumo's defense going forward? So, yeah, I mean, definitely will be interesting to see who gets let out there because you're right. If Womack does get in, Lamons is most likely going to be cut out, and or I mean, could I be so bold, Cody, as to say Juju doesn't get in and you have Chris Lamons? Because I mean, it depends. I don't believe that Juju would get cut over Womack because even with Juju very rarely playing this offseason, I think Juju Brents' game is going to be more impactful for Lou Anarumo's type of defense. But I mean, again, it's very competitive on the back 5 of the back 5 and 6 of this position right now.
Right. And it very well could come down to scheme too, Derek. Like, who fits the scheme better? Who do they feel like is going to be a better fit for what they do? Right. Because last year, we're talking about how Sam Womack looked last year in Gus Bradley's defense.
Yep.
Could it be completely different? And maybe his strong suits aren't suited for Lou Anarumo's defense. I don't know what the answer is there, but I'm just saying I wouldn't be shocked at all if, a guy like, guys that we like are going to get cut. Like, that's just a reality, right? Guys we don't expect are going to get cut. Could Chris Lamons be the guy, or could it be Sam Womack? I could see it either way. I really could. So, but special teams might play a factor. I'm just saying, don't count that out at all. All right, let's round this out here, Derek, before obviously we talk about the kicker, punter, long snapper, which I'm pretty sure we know those. But let's talk about the 4 safeties we're keeping.
Yeah, so obviously Nick Cross and Cam Bynum. Nick Cross's injury definitely is a concern. I definitely want to know more about Nick Cross because that hip flexor, he's been out for several weeks now, and we haven't really heard anything about that at all. So, yeah, I don't know what the Colts will do with that 4th safety position there. Likely they will be looking for safeties who are cut after roster cuts to maybe look for somebody other than a Rodney Thomas. And I know you talked a week or two ago about, the idea of the Indianapolis Colts potentially signing a safety that is currently still on the free agent market. That could still be an idea, and normally you keep 5 safeties, but with the idea of, obviously you got to keep 6 corners, it's going to be hard to be able to keep 5 safeties in this defense. They might, though. We could see a scenario where they do keep only 4 linebackers and 5 safeties just because of the depth needed, the amount of guys that are going to be on the field for that.
Yeah, I could see that. I do think that is, if there's one position I think they need to make a splash in, it's safety. Even if it's like nothing crazy, like even just a solid vet, I think would go a long way for that feeling of safety. I mean, heck, we saw what they did at corner, so maybe that's kind of the deal with safety here. And like you said, roster cuts are happening on Tuesdays, so after that, we could see them make a potential signing there. They still have some cap space to do that, so I think that would make a lot of sense for the Indianapolis Colts to do that. And that, I think for a lot of people, that'd make you sleep a lot better at night, knowing that you have guys that can go in there that you trust. Like Daniel Scott, he has had 2 really good games back to back in the preseason. And obviously, we saw the pick 6 he had against the Cincinnati Bengals. He also should have had an interception against the Green Bay Packers that got called back. But yeah, he's been making plays. And, we obviously heard the Colts raving about him, Derek, even last year, in the last couple of years when he was drafted. So, I think making him that third safety is great. And if you sign another safety in there, I think you feel pretty content about where you're at in terms of that defense. So, yeah. And then obviously talking about the special teams kicker, I think it's pretty obvious at this point. Spencer Schrader is going to be that guy. Obviously, we know Rigo's going to be your punter. And then you got Luke Rhodes as your long snapper. So I think that pretty much does it, man. And that equals 53, I believe, if our math is correct. Although math was my worst subject. So if you're off a number or two, do apologize.
Math was my strong subject, so you're good.
Okay, so you got us covered. So if we're wrong in any way, blame Derek for that. But anyway, guys, that'll do it for this one. Let us know your thoughts here on the different guys that may or may not be cut for the Indianapolis Colts come Tuesday. Roster cuts, final 53-man. Any guys that you would add or take out that we had here on our final 53-man roster projection. Let us know in the comments down below. Again, guys, this is very subject to change. Like we said, there are multiple scenarios that could happen. We try to give our best guess at it, but the only people that truly know are the people inside that organization. So that'll do it for this one, though, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, guys, go Colts. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you're looking for a sports book this football season, be sure to visit America's #1 sports book, FanDuel, today.